Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Thursday, July 30th, 2026. Great to be with you on a Thursday morning and every day, as we say, here on EWTN's Catholic Connection. So much to talk about, and we are going to start off, as we always do, with two segments with our very own Father Mitch Pacwa for our cultural connections. One of the reasons that I really like to tap into the wisdom of many of the folks that we have that work for us at EWTN and have worked with us for years and are great teachers such as Father Mitch is because they help us look at everything, as my friend late Al Cresta used to say, through the lens of Scripture and the teachings of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Everything is connected because everything goes back to God. And I was watching the hearings, I'm sure many of you were yesterday, from the Homeland Security Commission led by Senator Rand Paul and senators from both sides weighing in and asking questions of Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was, of course, a point man during COVID, and just devastating the way the whole situation unfolded and the embarrassment, not answering not even one simple question, invoking the Fifth Amendment 111 times, even after receiving a sweeping pardon from Joe Biden before he left office. Now, the reason I'm looking to Father Mitch is because how many of us have relatives who may have died from COVID, who may have died alone from COVID, who couldn't have a funeral because of COVID for a loved one? How many of your children were locked down and had to educate at home or online, right? Online learning. The damage that was done to businesses, to people who spoke out, to the church in terms of churches closed, sacraments not being able to receive. I know so many people who could not be with their loved ones when they died, including my friend Vanessa Denhagarmo, who was on with us yesterday, in addition to being attacked by fellow reporters when she dared simply ask a question. Why aren't we talking to other sources besides Dr. Fauci? Okay, let him comment. Obviously, he's a big person in this situation. But aren't there other medical experts to whom we can turn? That's all she did was ask that question as a journalist. And there are still people to this day that don't speak with her because she dared to raise a very obvious and journalism 101 question. So much fallout that we're still experiencing 6 years later. Now, I found the gospel very comforting today. And I'm paraphrasing, I'll share it with you when we're on with Father Mitch Pacwa, where our Lord talks about the fact that, you know what, I see everything. I know what's going on. So he is going to be separating the good from the bad. At the end, we know that. But our church has beautiful teachings on justice and serving justice. And so I want to tap into Father Mitch about this because we need to be able to talk to people because people are so irate. Some of the videos that I was seeing on social media, just heartbreaking, of people who went to see their elderly relatives and had to stand outside their window. Next day they die. It's just heartbreaking. And then not one question answered by this person who was the point person and called himself the science. Not just we have to follow the science, which we know there were so many mistakes that were made now. He called himself he was it, the be all and end all. And claiming that people are picking on him and trying to embarrass him when these were his notes. He didn't deny that yesterday. He referred to it as my diary, but they were personal notes written on a government computer while he was serving as a government official during a major international medical crisis. So how are we to approach this? How are we to help comfort other people where probably so many different memories and painful situations are coming back? We'll talk with Father Mitch Pacwa about that in two segments. And then there was a very powerful story on the National Catholic Register recently about our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom. We're going to be checking in with Mark Lippelman, and he is the senior counsel for ADF, about Catholic charities suing my home state of Michigan, and for very good reason. Last month, a federal lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court claiming leaders in the state of Michigan, shocker, targeted a Catholic charity for following the teachings of the Catholic Church. If you know anything about our governor or our attorney general, well, then you would understand why this lawsuit is definitely necessary. So Mark joins us to wrap up the first hour of the program. Hour number 2, looking forward to chatting with Mary Bowen. She is with Industrial Family Films, and she'll be telling us about a film in production right now, a beautiful film, Fabiola. The Bowen family is a homeschooling family that has spent the last 12 years building an independent film studio dedicated to bringing Catholic faith and the teachings of the church and the saints to life on the screen. So that should be a wonderful segment. And then we're wrapping up with Patrick Brown from the Ethics and Public Policy Center regarding how America's housing shortage is actually turning into a moral crisis. And Patrick is a fellow in the Life and Family Initiative at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and he joins us to wrap up hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on a busy Thursday morning. Weather-wise, we still have dangerous heat remaining across portions of the southern part of the country through the weekend. A heat wave over the southwest intensifying, peaking and expanding into the intermountain west and the northern high plains this weekend. Severe thunderstorms producing damaging winds and heavy rainfall over portions of the north central plains into the mid-upper Mississippi Valley, and that will happen today. Already 5 minutes past the hour, we have a lot of news to get through, as you can imagine. Let's get started with the news here on a Thursday morning. It's July 30th, 2026 on EWTN. Well, Scott Carr tells us the U.S. has started launching strikes on Iran. He has more from Washington.
U.S. Central Command says in a post on X the strikes are a response to Tuesday night's attacks by Iran on American forces in the Middle East. CENTCOM says all the Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted. Speaking with reporters Wednesday, President Trump said Iran knows it's coming, adding it's our turn, though Trump held out hope that diplomatic efforts will prevail. I'm Scott Carr in Washington.
Meanwhile, reports indicating Iran is receiving up to 400 handheld missile launchers from China. Reuters saying Iran purchased hundreds of shoulder-fire air defense systems along with Chinese missiles for about $70 million and is expected to receive that first shipment within weeks. China's foreign ministry, however, is calling the report completely groundless. Anthony Fauci appearing in front of a Senate Homeland Security hearing yesterday, refusing to answer even one question from any lawmaker on either side of the political aisle, even questions about the color of his tie, the color of the carpet. Instead, he invoked the Fifth Amendment not once, but 111 times.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The former NIH director, who was the point man during COVID, saying it was to avoid what he called the Republicans possibly using his testimony to prosecute him for perjury. The 85-year-old serving as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for 38 years before his retirement in December of 2022. It all came days after Senator Rand Paul released some 1,000 pages of personal notes kept by Fauci on a government computer during the height of COVID and what he calls Fauci's diary. Republicans say Fauci's own writings reveal deliberately downplaying the theory that COVID-19 originated from China's Wuhan lab while basking in his own celebrity. Former President Biden said he preemptively pardoned Fauci because of possible unjustified and politically motivated prosecutions by the incoming administration. Senator Josh Hawley, meanwhile, the former state attorney general of his home state of Missouri, accusing Fauci of using taxpayer resources to pursue cash prizes for himself, including coveted recognition such as the Dan David Award, the Adelson Prize, and awards from the Smithsonian, the National Academy of Medicine, and more. Hawley adding yesterday, based on Fauci's own writings, Fauci proved that he lost his way and was focused on personal gain and fame instead of providing solid medical advice that impacted millions of Americans and those around the world.
To make sure that nobody else stole your spotlight, you wanted to be the guy. You had time to sit for InStyle magazine. Here's what you were doing with your time. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you can't answer questions for the American people. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you're here taking the fifth. You could sit for InStyle magazine and get $1 million in cash awards. But now the cat's got your tongue. I bet he does. I tell you what, here's my conclusion from all of this. This was really all about you the whole time. Somewhere along the way, you lost your way. You may have been a good public servant at one time, I don't know. But I can tell you from reading your emails now, from looking at what you did, how you used your employees, somewhere along the line, it became all about you.
Meanwhile, President Trump at the White House yesterday during a press conference criticizing Anthony Fauci's handling of COVID-19.
Of nobody wearing masks, if you remember, and then everybody had to wear 5 masks, as many masks as you could get. I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, and he wasn't a big factor for me. He was a very big factor for Biden.
Republican Senator Rand Paul said the Homeland Security Committee will vote on a contempt resolution against Anthony Fauci next week after, again, he invoked the Fifth Amendment in the COVID-19 hearing. Trump was asked about the vote, but only say Fauci didn't do him any favors in the early days of the pandemic. The president instead said he left decisions about masking and closing schools to state governors, not Fauci. Mark Mayfield tells us a death toll from last week's devastating earthquake, or this week's devastating earthquake in Japan, has now risen to 30.
The magnitude 6.8 earthquake on the island of Kyushu destroyed or damaged numerous buildings, including a busy shopping mall. Emergency crews have been searching for survivors trapped in the rubble and reported 6 more deaths today. Several more deaths were reported in the collapse of a paper mill. Thousands of people in the region are now living in shelters, and thousands of homes have no water or electricity. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Next week, on August 6th, that's a Thursday, the Feast of the Transfiguration, the Holy Father traveling to Assisi in Umbria. There he will gather with hundreds of young people, celebrate Mass, and meet local authorities and church representatives. He's meeting young people to take part in the Go Franciscan Youth Meeting, which is taking place in that area from August 3rd to the 6th. According to the schedule released from the Holy See Press Office today, the Holy Father will leave the Vatican at 8 a.m. by helicopter, arriving in Assisi at 8:30. He will be welcomed, of course, by the Archbishop there and Italian authorities, and then go to the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels, where he will meet with ministers general of the Franciscan orders before gathering with young people in the square in front of St. Mary of the Angels at 8:45 and answering their questions. Following their event, the Holy Father will greet representatives of the Franciscan order, including members of the national committee that organized the events for the 800th anniversary of the death of St. Francis. And Pope Leo joining the prayer gathering Canticle of Peace at Borgo Lazio C at the Pontifical Gardens of Castel Gandolfo last night, together with Andre Bocelli and the ABF Voices Choir, made up of young people from Uganda, the Holy Land, and Italy. He said music can lead us beyond the threshold of mystery, just as someone following a stream eventually reaches its source. The beauty of song, the Pope said, can guide us toward God, satisfying the thirst for meaning and happiness that the world itself cannot quench. Recalling the choirs of angels and saints described in Scripture, the Holy Father observed they do not literally sing all the time. Rather, their perfect harmony springs from their shared contemplation of God, a harmony that earthly music, too, can help us approach. Thousands of firefighters in Oregon battling the 4 largest wildfires in the country. The Oregon State Fire Marshal saying over 11,000 firefighters are currently trying to contain 30 large fires across that state, including several north of Bend in central Oregon. Hazardous air quality from wildfire smoke has been reported in the town of Madras, which is just west of the 300,000-acre Roe Creek Complex fire. And Mark Mayfield tells us summer is kicking into high gear on the West Coast with another extreme heat warning that is just about to begin.
It will start at 10 a.m. tomorrow and end at 8 p.m. on Sunday. The National Weather Service says temperatures in the hottest inland and valley locations could hit 110 degrees. Everyone is reminded to make sure children and pets are never left alone in cars. Be sure to stay hydrated and wear lightweight clothes. If you need help finding a place to cool off, call 211. I'm Mark Mayfield.
I'm Teresa Tomeo. Father Mitch Pacwa, our Cultural Connection, up next on a Thursday. Thanks so much for tuning in to EWTN Global Catholic Radio on a Thursday. The late, great Pope St. John Paul II said, forgiveness is not the opposite of justice. Yes, we are called to forgive. We have to forgive. It's clear in Scripture and church teaching. But also, there is justice. If you read the different documents of the church, if you read the catechism, there is a system of laws. And many of the laws, of course, are based on the Ten Commandments. But thinking about this and praying about watching everything yesterday and all this information about the latest details coming out of this COVID crisis that we're still impacted by 6 years later. And I read the gospel for this morning, and I found it, as always, very comforting and very challenging. This is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 13, verses 47 through 53. Jesus said to the disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets, what is bad they throw away. This it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Do you understand all these things? He said. They answered, yes. And he replied, then every scribe who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who brings from his storeroom both the new and the old. When Jesus finished these parables, he went away from there. So what I took from this, Father, and we were talking about this during the break, and thinking about everything that transpired yesterday and some of the shocking things that we heard from these notes that Fauci made on his on his computer, his government computer, while he was running the whole COVID situation, while he was a point man, is that God sees everything, and he has got this under control. In the meantime, though, as I mentioned, we do have a right to call for justice, people being treated fairly. This whole situation is so crazy when you think about what happened and how we're still dealing with it. So I just wanted to get your take on it from a truly Catholic perspective, because so many of our listeners had family members who died alone, or, as in my case, could barely have a funeral for their parent because of COVID. I know so many people who had horrible situations. What are we to do? How are we to view this? And thanks, as always, for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be with you. A couple things. Yes, our Lord knows all that's happening, and our Lord will settle with everybody. That's for sure. But at the same time, we can take a look ahead at another parable later on that our Lord says, when I was hungry, thirsty, naked, in prison, and sick, you came and took care of me. So that's all a good thing. But then we also have to see that there are roles for the people who are in positions of authority in the government to also be God's arms and hands and eyes and ears to execute justice. That, yes, God sees all this stuff, but just as he wants us to use our hands and our feet and eyes and ears to feed the hungry and clothe the naked, there are also certain people appointed legitimately in government to exercise justice against those who do evil. St. Paul says that God has appointed governors and such precisely to take care of evildoers. And so we have to keep in mind that this is a legitimate. We're not quietists who simply stand back and they go ahead and wait for God to eventually act in some extraordinary, miraculous way. The exercise of justice by legitimate authority is a proper way to serve God and serve his people and rectify wrongdoing. That is the reason these committees and perhaps courts are very important for helping us to understand, what did these people know and do? And was it criminally wrong? And if it was criminally wrong, then they also have the moral obligation to punish, according to the law, things that broke the law. These are civil matters. Mm-hmm. And it's totally legitimate for that to be done, because justice in its core meaning is giving to everyone as is their due. If someone has taken various things from us, such as our freedom freedom of religion and a variety of other points, and has given overweening power to the federal government or the state government, contrary to what is due to people, and knowingly did that, they have to be responsible and suffer the consequences of bad behavior and malicious behavior if that can be proven criminally in court.
It's a very difficult situation now because as Joe Biden was leaving office, he gave him a sweeping pardon to, according to Joe Biden, protect him from, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but, right-wing conspiracies and attacks from the right wing, attacks from Republicans.
Right.
But these were his own notes that were being written during the height of COVID. They were written on a government computer. They were discovered in an investigation by the Health and Human Services Department during an ongoing investigation about COVID and the fallout from which we're all still suffering in so many ways. The church, children, it's endless. People lost jobs, lost businesses, lost loved ones. 1 million people died, nearly 20 million people around the world. Everything was thrown into chaos, right, for such a long period of time. And, he refuses to answer even one question. Invokes the fifth 111 times, and then he's out walking in the afternoon on his power walk, and you see some of these people online in some interviews sobbing and revisiting what happened to their relatives in nursing homes. It's disgusting, Father.
Here's something we have to keep in mind. Our Bill of Rights is structured so that he has the right not to say anything to incriminate himself. He has that right.
Yeah, but lawyers were saying yesterday that when you have a full pardon like that, it doesn't apply. He could have answered questions without incriminating himself because he couldn't be prosecuted. I don't know. There's a debate going on about that right now. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what's being said.
This is where lawyers are, trying to deal with that balance. And the pardon, by the way, was written to go all the way back to
2014.
Mm-hmm. And which means that anything that he had done for the gain of function research is also outside of prosecution. This is the legality of that is not clear. Does President Biden has that authority? So this is why I say these are lawyers getting involved in complicated details of what is legal. And the problem is what you mentioned. While they are dealing with all these details of law, which ultimately are very important because you think about what could have happened to anybody else, too. So it's protecting other cases as well as Fauci. The reality is people have suffered horribly, and still that same suffering is ongoing.
Right.
People who lost their businesses didn't all of a sudden get an ollie oxen free.
Right.
Their businesses are still gone.
Right.
Their livelihood is gone.
Father, let's pick this up on the other side of the break. A number of questions I need to ask. Play a clip from a former government official saying he's ashamed of what he's hearing and that the Fauci that was revealed in the notes is not the Fauci he knew for many years. We'll be right back with Father Mitch Pacwa on a Thursday. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in on a Thursday morning, always giving you a Catholic perspective on issues in the world every single day, because it all goes back to our Lord. Amen to that. So, Father, there's a whole other aspect of this that came out during the hearing yesterday. Even though he didn't answer questions, the senators who questioned him did bring up several points from his some 1,000 plus pages of notes, which, by the way, again, if people don't know where they came from, Robert Kennedy Jr., the head of the Health and Human Services Department, says that they were doing an ongoing investigation, and they were able to track down these notes from a government computer on which Fauci was working during COVID. So they're doing this ongoing investigation for obvious reasons, because, as you mentioned, people are still so impacted. So who knew what when? The other aspect, in terms of, he admitted in his notes that he had a bad side effect from the vaccine, while at the same time publicly talking about how safe it was. He had a blood clot, and it was very serious. He, of course, talked about the fact that there was no connection over and over again to the Wuhan lab. And in the notes, he says that he realizes that there is, I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I don't have the diary in front of me. It's so many different situations, the whole situation with masks. But the scary thing was that the vast majority, if you go through the pages, is all about him, with whom he had dinner, what celebrity, where he went, how many people wanted selfies. I am the most popular man alive. I'm being voted the most sexiest man alive in America. I mean, the narcissism is a whole nother aspect. I mean, you would think, okay, even do you think maybe if he admitted some mistakes in the document, that, or at least apologized on some level yesterday, but it's like, it's just unreal what's going on here.
Here's another problem with that. The narcissism is precisely what blocks a person. I don't know Fauci, but that's precisely what blocks a person from having the humility to repent. Repenting means I was wrong.
Right.
This would be an unraveling of all kinds of repentance. But narcissism and pride keep one away from that. Meanwhile, people, as you say, he's defending himself. He's mad that they got his diary, but they got it on government property. It was not his personal computer.
Right.
It was a government computer. It wasn't his. Why are you writing your personal notes on a government computer? That you set yourself up for this kind of problem. And as a result, he's also finding from the same people who were supporting him during COVID and making him the great hero and having dinner with him and all that, that the same people in the media are now portraying him as the martyr. And we see a pattern here. The way that the man that allegedly shot the insurance executive in the back of
Mangione, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He is, people who assume he did it treat him as a hero on the left. And now we see the same kind of pattern that obviously, Fauci's diary says he knew of the problems. He suffered a little bit from the problem. And he lied about his impact on various government officials, like Gavin Newsom and others, in terms of bringing these rules that caused tremendous pain, rules that apparently neither Fauci nor those politicians followed. And then they want to claim that this is the martyr, while people who suffered at their hands are, in shock and outrage at this, as we all should be, because, of course, I know one friend who still is suffering from long COVID, and another family who just lost their son recently because of apparently from the effects of the antidote to the virus. It affected a number of young men's heart health very badly, and he's one of them. And perhaps another child is set up for similar danger because of some other factors. So all this stuff people are going through all over the country. And we can forgive, but you can't have forgiveness received if there's no no repentance,
Right.
and there's no repentance if there is arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
A narcissistic arrogance is narcissism is one of the psychological disorders that is more difficult to deal with than any other, because people still, with narcissists, think that even when you're criticizing them, at least you're still talking about me.
Right.
And so this is a very difficult disorder if that's what he had.
Well, he was saying, and the only thing
point.
he said was an opening statement, and it was everybody else's fault but his. It was particular politicians that were obsessed with him and trying to embarrass him. And I'm thinking, you're the one. He didn't deny that he wrote all of this. There was no denial that these were his notes. But he said, you're trying to embarrass me, so it's your problem, not mine. And didn't even have the decency to stand up and turn around and look at the people who were there at the hearing, who had either been canceled, who had been fired, who had been hurt greatly by COVID. He would not even turn around. The whole thing was such a show. And then his attorney is sitting there, and his attorney wasn't even supposed to be sitting at the table, and he tries to deflect the attention away from it. It was, to me, it was so evil, Father. And yes, we forgive, but we've got to get to the bottom of this. And then he just goes back home, and he goes out walking like nothing's wrong. Goes and takes his power walk with his wife in the afternoon.
Yeah. It's and he has to be. I hope he has good security. I don't want to see the man harmed by that. As a reaction to the anger people have.
Right.
But this has stirred up so much strong feeling at a time when stirring up strong negative feelings causes great danger to individuals all over the place. This is one of the reasons why everybody else has to be cautious about not letting their anger and sense of the injustice, which is correct, to get an emotional reaction instead of a legal one.
Right, and you have to have a righteous anger, so the anger is applied appropriately to make sure that something is done, that these things are addressed and not just swept under the rug, and act in a very dangerous and criminal way.
The justice has to be done thoroughly and correctly according to just law. But we also have to keep this in mind. There is a real concern that about vigilante violence in a culture where the left has been doing that. We've seen the progressive left. But
Father, hold that thought. Can you stay with us, because there's some other points that I want to address that are really super crucial for all of us to address this from a truly.
About 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, we're going to play some clips for you when we come back and get your reaction. We'll be right back with Father Mitch. We have such a great team at EWTN for a long list of reasons, but Father's on a very tight schedule today and actually walked into the studio to record shows, and his wonderful producer, Jason, and of course, one of our top directors, Jody, they're all there in studio, and I said, please ask them to just keep Father on with us for the next 10, 12 minutes, and they said, yes, we will, because they know it's a very important story, and they're being very gracious because he has an extremely tight schedule. So thank you, Father. Thank your great team. I want to let you continue your comments you were making regarding vigilantism, which is a big concern.
Yeah, I mean, vigilante justice is wrong. It's something that cannot really satisfy the need for justice to various individuals. Mm-hmm. This is something that it's not trial by a jury. It's not listening to the evidence. It's jumping to conclusions, and then bringing harm, because already before anything began, there was a decision to bring harm to the alleged perpetrator. And we have to be very, very cautious about that in all things. Now, I know on the left, they're not doing that. They are, doing terrible things to Jewish people and churches, the burning churches, all that. Yeah. We can't imitate them, whether we're religious or not religious. Vigilantism is something that is not only ineffective, it brings long-term harms. And as someone who has lived in the West and in the South, where such vigilantism has existed in the past, we know that this is not right. So we even have a museum that is just dedicated to that kind of thing. So this we have to eschew that completely. But we do have to look at the evidence. And I know that Dr. Fauci was all upset that people were looking at his diaries. It wasn't by the fact that he wrote it on a government computer means it was no longer his. It was part of a government record. He did not intend that, apparently, but it's the fact of the law. And this is why we have to follow the law on all these things. Had it been seized from his house on a private computer, I would be with him 100% of the way. That this is unjust seizure, and that's also against the Bill of Rights. You cannot have unwarranted search of a private property and seizure. That's in the Bill of Rights. But in this case, he doesn't have that right because he didn't write it on private property. He wrote this on government property, making everything he wrote in there part of government property.
Well, especially when he was saying one thing and doing another, Father. He was having dinner with Jake Tapper twice at Jake Tapper's home. At the same time, within a week of that first dinner with Jake Tapper from CNN, he is publicly saying, sorry, but the holidays are going to have to be lonely for some, because unless you can assure that everyone in your family is vaccinated and has not been exposed to COVID, then you have to be alone. He was telling people to isolate, and he was having a grand old time dining with everyone and their brother. And then the other thing that's really troubling, and I want to play a clip for you. We have a clip from the former FDA commissioner who has known Anthony Fauci for a long time, who was interviewed after the hearings yesterday, who said he's just appalled that as a physician, in his diaries, he wasn't talking mainly about the problems, the suffering, his frustrations, not being able to wrap this up. It was all about, again, the dinners he attended, the people who interviewed him, the fact that he was on the cover of this magazine, the fact that he met Julia Roberts or she did an interview with him, or his conversation with Barbara Streisand. It was me, myself, and I. And listen to what this ex-FDA commissioner has to say regarding what he called outrageous comments by Fauci in the diary. Roll it, Richard.
The part of it that also disappointed me was how much he enjoyed the media associated with the event and his own appearances. I think a lot of us went on the media out of a sense of obligation. It was a hard time for all of us. I know it was a hard time for you. I think a lot of us felt an obligation to inform the public, and it wasn't particularly enjoyable. I mean, I got a lot of threats, others did, associated with that. And so to see those emails where he is evidencing some pleasure in the notoriety he achieved, that's disappointing.
It's not just, it's just outrageous if you read the diary entries. It's tough to take.
Yeah, so this host from CNBC is talking with the former FDA commissioner, and the FDA commissioner is saying, well, why isn't he talking about the problems with COVID as opposed to just talking about with whom he had dinner? I really, the whole thing is just mind-blowing, Father.
Yeah, I know. And this is, let's even take one step further back. What he is alleged to have done is finance this gain-of-function research. So folks understand that not all research is good. This was researching a virus in order to change it, to use it for other purposes. This is the kind of research that opens the way for warfare using viruses. And that this gain-of-function research is allegedly financed by some of his work. I don't know the details. This is one of the allegations that is being made. That also goes against human good. Doctors take a Hippocratic oath saying they will do no harm. He allegedly has funded research that did tremendous harm to millions. I mean, the bad effects of COVID were even worse in places like China. We still don't know the whole story there, but the allegations of what the Chinese government did to COVID patients is very, very serious.
Yeah. I want to address an email I just received from a Joe. His name is Joe, and he says that we don't know what we're talking about. And why are we talking about politics on the radio? When you call yourself a Catholic person, you can't even see evil. Okay, so we can't talk about politics. So we can't talk about immigration, abortion, health insurance, death penalty, all political, COVID shutting down churches, COVID affecting people in nursing homes, caring about the poor. This attitude, Father, among fellow Catholics that we can't talk about politics because it's hitting a nerve, maybe about a politician they don't like who was involved in this hearing or something. Yeah. This is so wrong as well. This is where people have to take a breath and say, okay, let's look at the big picture.
This is where, and this is why we talk about it. This is not about elections. It's
right.
Not about getting a politician in or out of office. This is about an allegedly criminal set of behaviors in which people died and in large numbers, and other people were harmed in a wide variety of other ways. These are ethical, moral questions that go back to the commandment, you shall not bear false witness.
Right.
And what this is alleging is that Dr. Fauci bore false witness in various government offices and changed the behavior and the outcome of people's lives radically, whereas now his diaries show he didn't think it was true. That, in other words, if the diaries are correct, then his public testimony was false witness. That is a Christian and Jewish moral issue. And that's why we speak about it.
Right.
And so that kind of thing, just because it happens in the government, does not mean that we can't talk about it. I'm not here to talk about the quality of different politicians and their election. I'm not promoting a politician or taking away from one. I am simply, and you are as well, we are dealing with the moral issue.
Right.
And
a moral issue at which the church was the center
witness.
of it, Father. The church was involved in it because of the shutting down of the churches and all the people who were dying. And what is the best way to approach this? So what? I don't talk about any of these issues because somebody's offended? I mean, this is what happens. This is what drives me crazy.
And don't this is people are falsely think that separation of church and state is in the Constitution.
It's not in the Constitution.
It was in a Supreme Court decision in 1947 and another one in 1948 that was actually delivered. The decision was delivered by a man who had been a Grand Dragon in the Ku Klux Klan until he was put on the court in 1936. Hugo Black. You can look up if you wish. So that's not an at issue here. It is the moral issue of false witness leading to the destruction of people's lives, both
right.
ending them early and ending their businesses and social lives and emotional. The effect on the schools is tremendous.
Yep.
So these are things. But I'm afraid I got to get going.
Okay, Father.
As much as I love it, but God bless, and I'm sure we'll come back to this.
Well, I appreciate your insights, and that's why I wanted to keep you on long, because I knew you'd have some great comments. So I appreciate it, and go ahead and tape, and thank the guys in studio, Jody, Jason, and the gang. I really appreciate them giving us some extra time this morning. Appreciate it. Father Mitch Pacwa joining us for 3 segments, actually, this morning of Cultural Connection. And he joins us every week to look at issues in the world from a truly Catholic perspective. And it's very interesting. Dr. Ray and I talk a lot about emails that we receive, and the emails that those of us who cover contemporary issues, things that are happening in the news, the negative emails we receive are 9 times out of 10 whenever we're hitting an issue that is out there in the general public that people claim are political, and when they disagree with the church teaching on those particular issues. And so it usually happens where people think we're playing to one side or the other. But as Father just said, this is not about a particular political party. This is about getting to the bottom of the tragedy of COVID-19, which continues today. Even under the Biden administration, the head of the Health and Human Services Department at that time, after we were starting to deal with COVID, people were starting to be able to go out in public again, was talking about the fallout from COVID and what happened especially with young people and this epidemic of loneliness that occurred in a major way from the COVID isolation, okay? And so that was addressed under both parties, both Democratic and Republican. And this overall issue in terms of not talking about politics, as I mentioned to this email from our listener, Joe, who's obviously very angry about our discussion this morning. God bless you, Joe. I hope you're still listening, and I hope you continue to listen. But if you're saying we can't talk about politics, then as I mentioned in my email response to you, we can't talk about abortion because that's a political issue. We can't talk about immigration, can't talk about health insurance, can't talk about the expansion of including in vitro fertilization under health insurance under the current administration, the Trump administration, as we've done several times with Bishop Daniel Thomas recently, with Father Tab Baholchek. These are all issues in which the Catholic Church is extremely involved because they all have to do with the dignity of the human person. If we can't talk about that, we don't have radio shows. End of story. We'll be right back. .54 minutes past the hour. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection on a Thursday morning. Appreciate Father Mitch Pacwa spending extra time with us. And thanks to the crew, Jason and Jody and the gang, down at our headquarters in Irondale for allowing Father to spend a few extra minutes with us. I know what that means because when you have studio time, it's very tight. But they know this is a breaking story and an important one that we need to cover. So they were very, very gracious in terms of allowing us to come on and talk about this at an extended level. So hour number 2, we are going to be looking at the culture. And this is something else the church talks a great deal about, the culture, and how we are to draw from beauty in the world. And Mary Bowen is going to be with us. And our topic is beautiful family films. And she has a company called Industrious Family Films. And we're actually going to be concentrating on a beautiful new film called Fabiola. And apparently it's based on a book that was a favorite of St. Therese of Lisieux. So looking forward to that discussion. And then we are going to be chatting with Patrick Brown, Ethics and Public Policy Center. This was a very powerful story that was in the National Catholic Register. And again, here we have politics again. Oh no, I guess I can't talk about it. America's housing shortage. That's political. Maybe we have to cancel that interview. Just saying. Anyway, we're not going to because we talk about these issues from a Catholic perspective. Patrick Brown, again, from the Ethics and Public Policy Center, America's Housing Shortage, how it's turning into a moral crisis. We'll discuss next hour. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Thursday. It's July 30th, 2026. Welcome to hour number 2 here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Today, by the way, I forgot to mention at the top of the first hour, it's a big day for southeastern Michigan. It is all about Father Solanus Casey who passed away in Metro Detroit and is buried in the beautiful Solanus Casey Center at the St. Bonaventure Monastery. So we'll take you there during our 2 cents segment and give you some quotes from the wonderful Solanus Casey. And I actually have an article that I'm going to be posting. I'm not sure when. I think it's out there now. I know that EWTN Publicity was handling it, but similarities between St. Francis and Solanus Casey. Of course, Solanus Casey being a Capuchin. So that will be 2 cents. And then coming up at the bottom of the hour, we have one segment with the lovely Mary Bowen. And the topic is industrious family films and a movie they're working on right now, Fabiola. It is about a Christian woman in early Christianity who was surrounded by Christians, and she watched them being tortured and killed for their faith and how it inspired her. Apparently, it was a favorite story of the wonderful, beautiful doctor of the church, St. Therese of Lisieux. And then last but not least, Patrick Brown from the Ethics and Public Policy Center is going to be joining us to talk about America's housing shortage. There was a great article in great detail he went into in the National Catholic Register article on this very important topic, which is very important, of course, to us as Catholics who care about people and works of mercy and more. So that is our number 2 of Catholic Connection. We do need to check the weather for you on a Thursday morning. Let's take a look. Dangerous heat, according to the National Weather Service, remaining across portions of the southern U.S. through the weekend. A heat wave over the southwest will intensify this week, peaking and expanding into the Intermountain West and the northern high plains this weekend. Severe thunderstorms producing damaging winds and heavy rainfall over portions of the northern and central plains into the mid-upper Mississippi Valley, and that will happen later today. It is 2 minutes past the hour. A lot of news to get through, so let's start right now. Thanks for listening to us here. Hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. Scott Carr tells us from Washington, the United States has started launching strikes again on Iran.
U.S. Central Command says in a post on X the strikes are a response to Tuesday night's attacks by Iran on American forces in the Middle East. CENTCOM says all the Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted. Speaking with reporters Wednesday, President Trump said Iran knows it's coming, adding it's our turn, though Trump held out hope that diplomatic efforts will prevail. I'm Scott Carr in Washington.
Meanwhile, reports indicating Iran receiving up to 400 handheld missile launchers from China. Reuters saying Iran purchasing hundreds of shoulder-fired air defense systems along with Chinese missiles for about $70 million, expected to receive the first shipment within weeks. China's foreign ministry, however, is calling the report completely groundless. In other big news this morning, Anthony Fauci, as we discussed in the first hour, appearing in front of a Senate Homeland Security hearing. Fauci refusing to answer a question from any lawmaker on either side of the aisle, even questions about the color of his tie, instead invoking the Fifth Amendment 111 times.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The former NIH director, who was the point man during COVID, saying it was to avoid Republicans possibly using his testimony to prosecute him for perjury. Fauci, 85 years old, serving as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for 38 years before his December 2022 retirement. This all came days after Senator Rand Paul released some 1,000 pages of personal notes kept by Fauci on a government computer during the height of COVID and what he calls Fauci's diary. Republicans say Fauci's own writings reveal deliberately downplaying the theory COVID-19 originated from China's Wuhan lab while basking in his own celebrity. Former President Biden said he preemptively pardoned Fauci because of possible unjustified and politically motivated prosecutions by the incoming administration. Meanwhile, Senator Josh Hawley, the former state attorney general of Missouri, accusing Fauci of using taxpayer resources to pursue cash prizes for himself, including coveted recognition such as the Dan David Award, the Adelson Prize, and awards from the Smithsonian, National Academy of Medicine, and more. Yesterday, Hawley said based on Fauci's own writings, the doctor proved that he lost his way and was focused more on personal gain instead of providing solid medical advice that's impacting still millions of Americans and those around the world.
That nobody else stole your spotlight. You wanted to be the guy. You had time to sit for In Style magazine. Here's what you were doing with your time. You could sit for In Style magazine, but you can't answer questions for the American people. You could sit for In Style magazine, but you're here taking the fifth. You could sit for In Style magazine and get $1 million in cash awards, but now the cat's got your tongue. I bet he does. I tell you what, here's my conclusion from all of this. This was really all about you the whole time. Somewhere along the way, you lost your way. You may have been a good public servant at one time, I don't know. But I can tell you from reading your emails now, from looking at what you did, how you used your employees, somewhere along the line, it became all about you.
President Trump also criticizing Anthony Fauci's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Fauci wanted to have nobody wearing masks, if you remember, and then everybody had to wear 5 masks, as many masks as you could get. I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, and he wasn't a big factor for me. He was a very big factor for Biden.
Republican Senator Rand Paul said the Homeland Security Committee, meanwhile, will vote on a contempt resolution against Fauci next week after he invoked the Fifth Amendment in that hearing yesterday. Trump was asked about the vote, but would only say Fauci didn't do him any favors in the early days of the pandemic. Mark Mayfield tells us a death toll from Tuesday's devastating earthquake in Japan in the southern part of the country has now risen to at least 30.
The magnitude 6.8 earthquake on the island of Kyushu destroyed or damaged numerous buildings, including a busy shopping mall. Emergency crews have been searching for survivors trapped in the rubble and reported 6 more deaths today. Several more deaths were reported in the collapse of a paper mill. Thousands of people in the region are now living in shelters, and thousands of homes have no water or electricity. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Todd Blanche's nomination for U.S. Attorney General is up in the air as Texas Senator John Cornyn withholds support over a disputed Justice Department fund. Blanche's nomination will not be advanced by the Senate Judiciary Committee today. This after the Republican said he won't vote yes until the Department of Justice provides a written commitment permanently ending a proposed $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. And Tammy Trujillo tells us President Trump announcing the Freedom Haulers initiative today. It's a push to put military veterans behind the wheels of commercial trucks.
The plan comes as the administration pledges to crack down on illegal immigrants and people who can't speak English driving big rigs on the nation's highways. The initiative will involve bringing together the Departments of Transportation, Labor, Veterans Affairs, and War for vets to get expedited commercial driver's licenses after they complete their service. Trump will unveil the program at the White House alongside Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Today, on Thursday, next Thursday, a week from today, August 6th, the Feast of the Transfiguration, the Holy Father traveling to Assisi in Umbria, where he will gather with hundreds of young people, celebrate Mass there, and meet local officials and church leaders. His meeting is to take part in a wonderful event with young people entitled Go Franciscan Youth, taking place in Assisi from August 3rd to the 6th. Now, according to the schedule, which was released today by the Holy See Press Office, the Holy Father will leave the Vatican at 8 a.m. on Thursday, a week from today, by helicopter, arriving in Assisi at 8:30 a.m. in the morning local time. He will be welcomed by the Archbishop of Assisi and also by Italian authorities. He will then go to the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels, where he will meet with Minister General of the Franciscan Orders before gathering with the young people right in front of the beautiful church of the St. Mary of the Angels in the piazza there to answer their questions. After that, he greets representatives of the Franciscan Order, including the members of the National Committee that organized the events for this very important Holy Year, the 800th anniversary of the passing of St. Francis of Assisi. At 10:30, he'll celebrate Mass at the Basilica of St. Mary's, and then, of course, meeting with the young person after that, and then his helicopter will head back to Rome at 12:45. And just a reminder, 2026, marking again the 800th anniversary of the death of St. Francis. And throughout the year in Assisi, there have been and continue to be many events, liturgies, and gatherings to mark this very special occasion. And the Pope joining the prayer gathering, Canticle of Peace at Borgo Lazio C in the Pontifical Gardens of Castel Gandolfo, south of Rome. He was with Andrea Bocelli and the ABF Voices Choir, made up of children's voices from Uganda, the Holy Land, and Italy. The Pope saying music can lead us beyond the threshold of mystery. Just as someone following a stream eventually reaches its source, the beauty of song can guide us toward God, satisfying the thirst for meaning and happiness that the world itself cannot quench. Organized by the Laudato Si Higher Education Center in partnership with the Andrea Bocelli Foundation and represented by the renowned tenor himself, the event formed part of a celebration, again marking the 800th anniversary of the death of St. Francis. And the beautiful readings included passages from St. Francis's writings, such as the Canticle of the Creatures, alongside biblical texts and words from several popes, including St. Paul VI and St. John Paul II, all the way to Pope Francis. Thousands of firefighters are in Oregon battling the 4 largest wildfires in our nation. The Oregon State Fire Marshal says over 11,000 firefighters are currently trying to contain 30 large fires across the state, including several north of Bend in central Oregon. Hazardous air quality from wildfire smoke has also been reported in a number of locations. And meanwhile, also on the West Coast, Martha Mayfield tells us summer kicking into high gear in California and another extreme heat warning that begins tomorrow.
It will start at 10 a.m. tomorrow and end at 8 p.m. on Sunday. The National Weather Service says temperatures in the hottest inland and valley locations could hit 110 degrees. Everyone is reminded to make sure children and pets are never left alone in cars. Be sure to stay hydrated and wear lightweight clothes. If you need help finding a place to cool off, call 211. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And firefighters have been working around the clock to hold back wildfires raging across Europe. French crews are working to contain a large wildfire near the city of Bordeaux, where an extreme heat warning is also in effect. In Spain, crews are battling a large blaze near Valencia, and the Spanish Prime Minister says there are now 10 active wildfires burning across the country. And in Greece, 2 wildfires are burning on the island of Crete that have killed 3 firefighters and also forced residents and tourists to evacuate. Meanwhile, Ross Cullen reporting from Bordeaux, France, where that wildfire has forced the evacuation now of about 220,000 people.
We're not bracing for the heat wave. It is here. It's 43 degrees outside at the moment, 40 in here where I'm standing in this warehouse, and you can see it is being repurposed as a preparation evacuation centre if there is a change in the direction of the wind.
43 degrees Celsius, by the way, is about 109 degrees Fahrenheit. In Spain, as we said, at least 6 regions are on orange alert, the second highest level, as temperatures are expected to reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah Lee Kessler tells us cyclosporiasis, a parasitic infection, has now spread to some 45 states.
There have been 6,700 lab-confirmed cases so far, with the CDC saying it's investigating more than 11,000 others. The Federal Health Agency also says at least 423 people have been hospitalized, but there have been no deaths. The outbreak, which is caused by ingesting food or water that contains cyclospora bacteria, began 3 months ago. The CDC says the only states that haven't reported any cases are Maine, South Carolina, Montana, New Mexico, and Hawaii. I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
The state of Utah has been named as the best state in the U.S. That's according to the largest rankings from U.S. News and World Report, and it's now the 4th year in a row that the state of Utah has been named the best state. Utah came out on top of the rankings due to a strong showing in a number of different categories. They ranked 2nd in economy and fiscal stability, as well as 4th in infrastructure. When we come back, introducing you to, if you don't know him already, the wonderful Blessed Solanus Casey. Thank God ahead of time. It's his feast day today. We'll tell you all about him and take you to a beautiful place here in Metro Detroit, in my hometown, where you can venerate his relics. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It is the feast of Father Solanus Casey, Blessed Solanus Casey, an amazing blessed and religious figure who passed away in my hometown of the Archdiocese of Detroit, southeastern Michigan. He's such a great, great figure, someone we can all admire. Of course, a wonderful Capuchin. He was servant of the sick and the poor. And he said, among other things, "Blessed be God in all of his designs and in his mercy, which is above all of his works." Now, if you go to the Solanus Casey Center, or what they call the St. Bonaventure Monastery, it is just outside downtown Detroit. And this is one of those places because it is a year of St. Francis. And if you go to a Franciscan center, a Franciscan church, you can, of course, obtain an indulgence during this year. And this is a beautiful place to visit. Let's say you're maybe coming up for our grand getaway. And many people do this when they head up to Mackinac. If they're driving, let's say, from another part of the Midwest, or maybe, I don't know, from down south. Many people drive so they can spend the time after the grand getaway and go to other beautiful locations in the state of Michigan and beyond. But definitely look up the Solanus Casey Center and go there. They have a number of different wonderful activities and things in which you can take part. They have a lovely museum that is dedicated to his life. And you can walk through, you can see some of his vestments, you can see his desk, you can see his sandals, and you can learn more about this humble preacher who was known as the doorkeeper. Why was he known as the doorkeeper? Because he was the doorkeeper, literally a doorkeeper. And he would let people in, he would talk to them. And there are so many people that to this day who aren't even Catholic who say that they were healed in some way, shape, or form by Solanus Casey, whether it was they were old enough now to, and when we were looking at his beatification, there were many people that were coming forward that actually had the gift of being able to meet with him when he was still alive, obviously, or were healed after calling on his intercession or praying at his tomb, which is also located in the Solanus Casey Center, also known as the St. Bonaventure Monastery. And then you can also see the great work of the Capuchins there, the soup kitchen, and how they still feed so many people in our area, in some of the rough and tumble neighborhoods in Detroit. It is a beautiful place, and there's a garden you can walk in and see, the garden of so many wonderful creatures, of course, beautiful plants, and there's also a whole series of statues of various saints and blesseds who were involved in similar type of work that was undertaken by the Capuchins and Solanus Casey, Dorothy Day, Mother Teresa, just beautiful. And so again, the Solanus Casey Center is located in Detroit. And if you're planning a visit, you can go to solanuscasey.org. Our greatest hope as you come to the center is that you will leave with a refreshed commitment to the gospel values which Blessed Solanus lived so well. So you can do group tours, you can do docent-led tours, you can bring a bus of pilgrims, you can even do a self-guided audio tour, is available, and you purchase it for only $5. And it provides a detailed step-by-step tour of the Solanus Casey Center that can be accessed via your smartphone. And for a docent-led tour, it's for groups of 10 or more, and a docent will lead you on a group tour. It's about an hour and a half tour of the center, and it's just so beautiful because at the end they usually will provide, if you want, a lunch, and you'll meet the Capuchins, and you'll meet some of them who can share their thoughts on Solanus Casey and the work they do in Detroit. And they also do tours, if you're with a school, for students, teachers, and parents. They have a number of different materials to assist the young people for their pilgrimage, and it opened all the way back in 2002. And it continues a long legacy of compassion and caring, which is what we are supposed to be doing as Catholics. So let's talk a little bit about Solanus Casey, all right? Such a wonderful figure that we should all consider emulating. He was born in Wisconsin along the Mississippi River, the sixth child of a family of 10 boys and 6 girls, Irish immigrant parents who left Ireland after the Great Famine. His father was born in 1840 in Ireland. After his father's death, he left home at the age of 17 with a younger sister. His mother's last words to him were, "Barney boy, keep the faith." They sailed from Liverpool and arrived in Boston in 1857 to meet other relatives. Bernard came quite skilled as a shoemaker in Massachusetts. After the Civil War ended, his father found shoemaking to be a dying business, farming seed to be the business of his future, so the family bought a big plot of government land in Prescott, Wisconsin. 3 years later, the Caseys moved to a large farm at Big River. 7 more children were born, and Barney spent 10 years there before leaving to work through the area as a logger, hospital orderly, streetcar operator, and prison guard. His childhood was rich in love, steeped in Catholic tradition. The children shared a love for sports, hunting, fishing, swimming, skiing, and skating. And the 10 boys formed their own baseball team, the Casey 9. Barney playing catcher, usually without a glove. The other boys enjoyed boxing, but Barney would not take part. Inflicting pain on another person, he said, was not aligned with his values. So that's his background. Now, what about his call to the priesthood? So for Blessed Solanus Casey, and again, you can find all this beautiful information about this Blessed Solanus Casey at their website, solanuscasey.org. His road to the priesthood was not simple or straightforward. Members of the Casey family greatly valued their Irish Catholic heritage. Barney kept good memories of daily prayer with his family. Solanus often recalled his father calling them "pray, boys, pray," and no surprise that the young Barney learned to love the rosary as his mother did. In 1883, before turning 13, Barney spent a few weeks at St. Patrick's Church in Hudson, Wisconsin. During instruction for his first Holy Communion, he first felt the Spirit stir within him, eagerly loving the lessons and the Bible, attending midnight mass on Christmas Eve, and secretly wondering whether he could be a priest. The stirring continued to grow until the age of 21 when he entered St. Francis de Sales Seminary in Milwaukee to study for the diocesan priesthood. He loved the discipline of his studies and he was well liked among his classmates. The German language of the lessons, though, were very difficult to comprehend. Finally, his superiors advised that he was not likely to succeed, and they suggested a religious order. Throughout the summer and the fall of 1896, he discerned his calling, and a spiritual advisor suggested he write to the Jesuits, the Franciscans, and the Capuchins. All three replied with letters of welcome, so which one would he choose? So we know he chose the Capuchins, and it's such an interesting story. We don't have time to go into it all. But what I love about his story is he was so humble and accepted his humble role, his limited role. He couldn't do everything as a priest, but he accepted gratefully and graciously his role as a doorkeeper. And after his ordination, he spent 20 years in New York, and then he moved on, of course, to come to southeastern Michigan in the monastery, St. Bonaventure Monastery, where he ministered as a porter for 20 years, from August 1st, 1924 to July 23rd, 1945. There's so much more to say about this wonderful servant of God, but you can find out all about it, again, at solanuscasey.org. There's a whole segment. Let me just go through this list of everything you can find out. If you want to read about him, I think it's a great thing to do. If you are coming to Michigan anytime soon or interested in visiting the church, saying a prayer at his tomb, going through the museum, solanuscasey.org. They talk about his Irish roots, his call to the priesthood, his Capuchin life, his spirituality, his love for the sick and poor, missions, road to sainthood, the miracles associated with his beatification, and also a number of messages, especially "Thank God ahead of time" was a great saying of his. We'll be right back. "27 minutes past the hour. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, hour number 2 on a Thursday. And what a great thing to undertake, to be concerned so much about the culture, and the church teaches us so much about this. To start a film company to bring beautiful things to the world, beautiful stories of the saints in our faith. On the phone with us right now is Mary Bowen, and she is with Industrious Family Films, and we'll let you know how you can find out more about them in a minute. The Bowen family is a homeschooling family that has spent the last 12 years building an independent film studio, again, Industrious Family Films, dedicated to bringing the lives of the saints and the church's literary classics to the screen. Our guest, Mary Bowen, has written and directed 7 films. She enjoys the creative aspect of filmmaking, relying heavily on her sister and co-director, Faustina, as the two take a film from idea to online streaming. Mary, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so we want to talk, first of all, about this beautiful film on which you're working. Fabiola, tell us about it.
So Fabiola is actually a novel, script that we lifted from a novel that was written by Nicholas Patrick Cardinal Wiseman in the 1800s, kind of the same time that Charles Dickens and Jane Austen were writing novels. He wrote the story that was based on a pagan Roman noblewoman during the Roman Empire, and she wants to be affluent and wants to be very sophisticated, so she intentionally surrounds herself with who she considers to be kind of an elite society. And as the persecution breaks out, all her friends are one by one turn out to be Christians and are martyred. And the main character, Fabiola, has to decide if she's going to continue to be a pagan or if she's going to embrace the lifestyle that she admired and become a Christian.
Wow. And I understand from doing some research on your website, this was a favorite of St. Therese of Lisieux?
Yes, Fabiola was, the novel Fabiola was a favorite novel of St. Therese. And she, I think her sister Celine said that she read it over and over again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because St. Therese, in her own admission, talks about the fact that she was very worldly early in her life.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Kind of liked yeah, like being kind of popular and wanting to be cute and pretty. I guess, yeah, and then for her to be a Carmelite kind of was surprising to everybody.
Right, and so I'm sure she could relate with the story. So where are we in the film itself, Fabiola? When can we expect to see it in the big screen?
Yeah, we are really hard working on funding right now. We have filmed 3 scenes, 2 of which are final cuts, and they will end up in the completed project. And we're going to, depending on funding, we'll continue to film all throughout 2027, and then hopefully be set for release in 2028, possibly the fall.
Give us your website before we continue, Mary, so folks know where to find you, and if they're interested in donating, where they can do that.
Yes, we have open investments right now for this project, as well as just a single one-time contributions, which do not have a return on investment. So you can find all of that information on www.fabiolamovie.com.
Okay, great. Fabiolamovie.com. So tell us about, and I think this is so fascinating, how growing up without television inspired the mission to create beautiful films.
Yes, that is kind of an interesting story. So my family, we would often, wake up in the morning and watch early morning cartoons and things. And then it wasn't until about when the Disney film Princess and the Frog came out, and I think it was 2008, and just actually having like voodoo spells coming out of a speaker really disturbed my parents. And so at that time we were moving, and the TV was just not a priority to make sure it made it into the U-Haul van. So the TV, all the VHSs and the DVD players and everything stayed behind. We did not bring that with us to where we had moved to. And for about 4 years, we were movie and TV free. We didn't watch any movies during that time. What we did, though, is we focused on things like gardening. We got kind of like semi-high maintenance farm hobby pets. And we picked up some musical instruments and learned how to play. And all of those years, tons of people were like, you guys are so talented. Your guys' family is so talented. And I don't necessarily think that we are more talented than other people. It's just we made more free time away from the screen to work on things that most kids our age weren't really working on. And in 2012, as a epiphany gift from my aunt, she got us the movie The War of the Vendée. And we had to go get a DVD player and figure out how to make it work in our computer. And that was the first time in 4 years we had watched the movie. And it was a homeschool film that was made by a family over in Connecticut, the Merlinos. And it really inspired us. We kind of it opened our eyes to the thought that actually we could make movies like how this family had made movies. And so from there on out, we got cameras, we got some sound equipment, and then we just kind of learned by trial and error how to do it. So
it's fascinating, though, because you were only 16 years old when it was started in 2017, right?
Yes. So then in 2017, we made our first full-length film, and I directed that while I was, my 16, 17 year.
Wow. And so that if it's 2017, that was, 9 years ago. So you're 25, right?
Yes. Yes,
oh
I am. I'll be 26 later this year.
God bless you. So accomplished at 25 years old, starting your own film company. Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So in terms of the ideas, how obviously you look toward the Catholic faith, but Lives of the Saints, Scripture, what else?
A lot of novels that we read in high school. We just wished, this should be a movie. Lots of times you see like old classics, and they actually have been turned into movies, and these were actually Catholic classics that were not really brought to the screen before, and that kind of inspired us to make sure those stories were reached by people in the more modern medium of film.
And do you find that the availability to place things online now so readily, which has really developed in the last 10, 15 years, is helping get the movies out?
Oh, yes, for sure. Things were so cumbersome in those early years. Just trying to upload a video to YouTube was a major hassle and chore. But things have gotten so fast and so easy now, and so easy to even promote and get more widespread.
How do you find those who are going to help you with the projects? Is it all family-oriented, the actors, the actresses? Where do you find them?
Yeah, they've always been just kind of family-oriented. Friends and people who are in our homeschool group, and more recently for Fabiola especially, we opened a casting call worldwide, even though mostly just the United States, the ones who responded, but open casting call, We have somebody from India who I'm sure wants to be in a film. I don't know how we could get him like a working visa or something. But that kind of just opened it up more to being able to actually fly people out and have more of a broader reach of people who are part of the film. And lots of people who've been trying to make their own movies who don't necessarily want to act, they've reached out too and just been like, how can I help? I will work for free. What can I do to help be part of this project and get my foot in with you guys to be helping make the movies and things? So that's been really, really good to get that more people interested and involved in the storytelling.
Down the road, what do you see? You're very young, 25 years old, very adventurous, very creative. What do you see for yourself and for your company, Mary?
I really do hope that we can continue to make our goal is to make a movie a year.
Wow.
As we've tried to get more, as we try to get more and more professional and kind of hone in the skill a little better. It's pulled us back a little bit, but I do want to make feature-length films, possibly once a year or every other year would be really. I consider that a great goal.
That's so exciting. So again, Fabiola, you're thinking is going to be out in the theaters hopefully in 2028, correct?
Yes.
Would you recommend folks see if they can find the book itself to read it before they watch the film?
Yeah, they can. The book is very
hard to find, I would imagine, at this point.
It's hard to find because first of all, it's out of print, and then it's also a very in-depth story. It is like reading a Jane Austen novel. When we wrote the script, we definitely simplified some things, combined some characters.
Yep. I want to give out the website before we let you go, industriousfamily.com, and of course the Fabiola film coming out in 28. We'll be right back. If you're a follower, and I hope you are, of the National Catholic Register, ncregister.com, perhaps you've read the very well-done piece on America's housing shortage. It was actually posted 3 days ago, on July 27th. America's housing shortage is turning into a moral crisis. A lack of affordable housing impacting everything from family formation to participation in parish life. Here to take a look at this issue is Patrick T. Brown. He's a fellow in the Life and Family Initiative at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. His work focusing on developing a robust pro-family economic agenda and supporting families as the cornerstone of a healthy and flourishing society. So, Patrick, this topic, this issue, which is a very important one, is right up your alley. So what is the problem right now, Patrick, in terms of affordable housing? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I mean, when you think about family life, the home is at literally, where you spend most of your time. It's the biggest chunk of most families' budgets. And so when the price of affording a home goes through the roof, as it has been, for decades, but especially after COVID just exploding across the country, it really puts a burden on particularly young couples who might be thinking about starting a life together, getting married, having a couple kids. They look around and say, we can never afford a down payment. And so they kind of are stuck in this holding pattern. And I think that what the article got at so clearly is it's not just an economic question, but it has real impact on how people live their lives and make decisions around forming families. So we need to take it seriously.
So you mentioned the issue of COVID, which we talked about extensively in the first hour with Father Mitch Pacwa because of the hearings yesterday and so much shocking information that came out regarding the handling of it by Anthony Fauci, who is the point man. How did COVID impact this situation?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a huge shock to the system in so many ways. But one of the big ways that I don't think anybody would have predicted at the time is that by forcing everybody to go remote, right, and it opened up a lot of opportunities where now you weren't going into the office 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. You're able to work remotely or maybe only go into the office once or twice. And so places that, previously had been more affordable, places in the western part of the United States, for example, Idaho, Denver, even parts of the Sun Belt, saw a huge explosion with people escaping high-cost blue cities like San Francisco or Washington, D.C. And so what was once kind of, you can talk about New York or L.A. as being expensive and, everywhere else is affordable. Now we've seen so many parts of the country in the last 5 or 6 years really start to push the bounds of what can be considered affordable for a middle-class family. And so we need to be thinking about, these long-term trends and what that means for people's marriage and fertility rates and all the rest.
So you've written extensively, as the article indicates, on the social impact of housing unaffordability. Where do we go from here? How do we help people? Because the popes are calling for this. Pope Leo has mentioned this, and of course we know that Pope Francis mentioned this in Amoris Laetitia.
Yeah, I mean, and they're right to, obviously. I mean, they're right about everything, but especially on this. I think treating the family as a economic unit means recognizing that families bear burdens, especially when you have young kids and maybe you're living in an apartment and you want a house with a yard or an extra bedroom to let the kid run around and that sort of thing. If there's no housing available to be found, or if you're having to move away from your extended family, a couple hours away because that's the only place you can afford, well, that's pretty anti-community, anti-family policy choices that we're making. So there's no one silver bullet, but it starts with allowing more housing to be built, making it easier for people who want to build smaller units, getting rid of regulations, environmental, regulations and that sort of thing. Going from there and really just being more proactive about ways we can bring more housing supply online, and then thinking about financing and some of the other things as well.
The other, I really think, compelling point that was brought out in the article, and I know that you've discussed this and looked at this in your work, is the connection between affordability or unaffordability in housing and participation in the church. Explain that to us, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of research to suggest that when people own a home, they feel more invested in their community, and they're more likely to volunteer, obviously, attend mass more regularly. They are more likely to show up when there's somebody who has a time of need or has a baby. You bring them the meal train over, right? Not saying renters can't do that, but just statistically, it's true that if we want people to be more present for each other, it's a lot easier to do that when you're not transient and you have roots in a community. And so helping more families get that foot on the ladder and be bought into, the great American dream of home ownership, of the white picket fence and all that, helps people to feel like they have a place that they belong. And so, again, it doesn't have to be McMansions that are $1 million homes. It can be the kind of starter homes that used to be built more frequently in the 50s and 60s. We kind of moved away from those. Even modest places where you're just getting a foot in the door can help people feel that stability that they need.
Talking with Patrick T. Brown, a fellow in the Life and Family Initiative at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, his work focusing on developing a robust pro-family economic agenda and supporting families as a cornerstone of a healthy and flourishing society. And we're talking about the housing crisis in America. I saw a story this morning that was interesting that said that most people can't even afford, let's say, $500 in an emergency fund. That's how tight things are right now. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, some of these statistics are kind of made to go viral, right? I think there's always some question about whether people are actually as hard up as sometimes they'll say. But all that is, I don't want to denigrate anybody who feels like they're pinched, because it is true. Inflation hasn't gone away, even with the change in administration, and there's still these pressures that, press on families in particular. Because, again, if you're an empty nester or you never had kids, it's easier maybe sometimes to economize. But when you have young kids running around, it's just, living in a city apartment, that's not really an option for most people. They have expenses that non-parents don't. And so an economy that doesn't take that into account, that sort of says, well, parents, you're on your own, good luck, that's not going to be one that's pro-family over the long run. And there's better and worse ways to go about it. But it starts with recognizing the need to get parents and young families kind of established and on a sound footing.
So how does the church help with this then? Because this is a big thing to bite in terms of trying to support families, because financially it would take a lot of money, and churches are so strapped right now anyway. What else can the church do you think, in addition to finances?
Yeah, I mean, this has been throughout the church's social teaching from the last 100 years. There's been plenty of folks weighing in on the claim of justice, right, that families can make, because without strong families, everything else in society falls apart. We know that the family is the cornerstone of a healthy society, and we recognize marriage as a sacrament. The reality that families can't do it on their own. And it used to be that churches were more maybe Knights of Columbus and life insurance and some of these things that they still do, but it's less materially necessary maybe than it was back in the day. But churches can provide that community aspect that, when people, aren't finding a place where they can call home and make friends and coffee, donut hour and all the rest, that is where we see all these problems of loneliness and all the rest. And so really being intentional about creating spaces and opportunities for families to come together and fellowship and find those bonds of connection. I think that's the first and foremost the thing that the church can do more than anybody, but also talking about the need for whether it's family-friendly workplaces or a larger child tax credit or other ways that our social institutions can help support families specifically. Building more housing is another one. Those kind of ideas should also be on the top of it.
All right, so what about the situation that we're seeing with these they call themselves democratic socialists, and we know that they're really communists, many of whom have very openly and strongly stated that owning property is racist and insisting that they have to take property away from people, and it's going to be all big daddy. The government's going to take care of you and give you your housing. Sometimes if people are strapped, God bless them, they could find this maybe as somewhat of relief. What are the dangers in that type of approach, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you lose sight of the supply and demand are not just words on a textbook page, right? They're actual forces in the economy. And so by trying to control these things centrally, you end up causing more harm than good. And again, people hear, rent control or rent freeze. That sounds so nice, but they're not thinking about the long-term consequences of telling developers, well, this isn't going to be a place where you can get a good return on your investment, or you're not going to reinvest in keeping up the quality of a place or a unit. And so there's always second-order effects that people need to be taking into consideration. But I think what they're pointing at and gesturing towards is the idea that life feels unaffordable for too many people. And we can talk about expectations. We can talk about, what wages have done over the last couple of decades. Those are all interesting conversations to have. But ultimately, it comes down to recognizing that people feel like they can't get their feet under them. And so, the status quo is not going to be tenable. We need to be investing in these approaches to make it easier to build housing and allow markets to do what they're really good at, which is bringing costs down when you're not kind of getting in the way. That's, I think, the more sustainable approach to affordability rather than, big government kind of subsidizing demand kind of programs.
Right. Talking with Patrick T. Brown, a fellow in the Life and Family Institute at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, about the housing crisis, and specifically citing a very important article that was in the Register earlier this week, 3 days ago, on July 27th. Some of the statistics in this article regarding the cost of family homes is shocking. The family, for example, that the writer interviews in the first part, in the first two lead paragraphs, Daniel Drain and his wife, Mary Colleen, say that they can't afford a home in Philly, in the area of Philadelphia. Family homes, the cost has risen 69% in the past 8 years.
Yeah, and again, in certain areas of the country, it's been skyrocketing, and it sounds like the neighborhood they're in is one of those places. Other places don't have the same problem, but it's been true across the board. If you just look at the national data in the late 80s, the average cost of a home was roughly 3.5 times the median salary for a given worker. Now it's almost 6 times. So that's basically relative to your annual take-home pay, the cost of a house has doubled. And again, some of that's because we're building fancier, bigger homes, so they're more expensive just mechanically. But also it's because we haven't built enough homes to keep up with the growing population. And so if you kind of freeze the supply and you're bringing in, immigrants and all the rest, that put pressure on the demand side, that does push prices up. And so unless you're really strategic and intentional about building new homes, building denser homes, thinking about new creative approaches, you're going to continue to see prices rise.
So we hear about this, and obviously our hearts ache for these families who are struggling. What can the individual do to help in general? What do you think?
Well, I think it starts with getting past that reflexive tendency of being change avoidant. I think I've noticed it in myself too. You drive past the old, supermarket, and they're going to turn it down and build a bunch of condos, and you go, "Oh man, I wish the way things used to be." And that's a human emotion that we all experience. But also, you have to think about the new neighbors that are going to be coming in, the new families that are going to be able to live there. And so, starting at the ground level, we can be more welcoming of new development, new housing, and all the rest, because that's ultimately going to be the only way we get out of the problem.
And so what particular church documents, before we let you go, we only have about a minute left, would you suggest people read in light of these issues, Patrick?
All of them? No. I mean, I think that tradition.
I encourage that all the time. Read the documents, read the catechism, read the encyclicals, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, Rerum Novarum, Familiaris Consortio.
Right.
I mean, some of even the most recent encyclical from Pope Leo, not obviously directly on housing, but thinking about the ecology of the human person and our anthropology as people made in God's image and likeness, and what it means to build policies that recognize that. I think that has universal applicability that's worth digging into.
Well, this is a very informative conversation, very helpful. Patrick, thank you so much. Speaking with Patrick Brown, fellow with the Ethics and Public Policy Center, on a Catholic approach to the housing crisis in our country. We'll be right back to let you know what's coming up on a Friday. Stay tuned. So I wanted to mention my friend Raymond Arroyo. Don't miss The World Over. It's such a great program. And I'm excited about the guest tonight. Archbishop Salvatore Corleone from San Francisco, discussing his amazing appointment to the Vatican High Court, also known as the Apostolic Signatura, just appointed by Pope Leo. And then we're also going to hear a discussion on the latest news on China, including the Vatican's recent approval of a compromised Catholic bishop. And then there will be more on the U.S.-Iran conflict and a new coalition to fight jihadism. All of this and more on The World Over with our very own Raymond Arroyo here on Catholic Connection. We are going to, of course, be having a great show for you, and we are going to have Father Robert Spitzer, 3 segments with him in the first hour. I am so excited. You may have heard me mention his new study Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith. It's huge. I'm holding it in my hands right now. It probably weighs about 4 pounds, but it's fantastic. So we're going to be talking about this new publication, this new beautiful Bible, Science, Reason, and Faith, Catholic Study Bible, Revised Standard Version, a Catholic edition, and it's published by our friends at Our Sunday Visitor. Now, in addition to this book, we're also going to be promoting the most recent book of Father Spitzer that ties into this, regarding Jesus, Mary, and miracles. And so in that book, he goes into great detail about the science behind the miracles, such as the shroud in Fatima, in Lourdes. So there's great information in that book. So what we're saying is to pick up a copy of both if you can, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow with the one, the only, Father Spitzer. See you on a Friday. Ciao, ciao.